There's a phenomenon scientists have observed called carcinization, and it's essentially a form of convergent evolution where multiple lines of ancestry have evolved the shape of a crab because the shape is so biologically successful. Far Cry 3 is the crab. Far Cry 3 was an outstanding game, and a pioneer at the time of its release. I sunk hundreds of hours into this game and developed a reverse tan while never seeing the light of day. Great story, an all-time great antagonist, a genuinely fun game that I can still enjoy today. Now, granted, Ubisoft was already experimenting with parts of the formula that make up what made Far Cry 3 great in the earlier Far Cry titles and Assassin's Creed, but Far Cry 3 is when they hit pay dirt. And riding that high, the industry has been making Far Cry 3 over and over for the past 12 years. Which brings me to the subject of my video, that these two games, while seemingly very different and adding and subtracting pieces of the formula, are Far Cry 3 in a trench coat. Now, I can already hear the objections to this. Let me justify my position. Let's see the stats here. Star Wars Outlaws, open world, shitty crafting, base clearing, collectibles, cookie cutter story made to justify the gameplay.
Space is
big.
Side quests to pad for time, although honestly, these are some of my favorite parts of this game. Squirrel with a gun, open world, collectibles, base clearing, more like location clearing in this game, cookie cutter, although enjoyable, story, side quests to pad for time. Now, what's my point here? So these games share some similarities. Big deal. Lots of games have pieces of this formula in their gameplay loop. It's an extremely influential game. Why does it matter? Because it's a stretch to call one of these games a Far Cry clone, despite the fact that they both have a lot of similarities in their overall gameplay elements. It'd probably be difficult to find another YouTuber comparing Squirrel with a Gun to Far Cry or Squirrel with a Gun to Star Wars Outlaws. I doubt you would find the same lack of willingness to compare Star Wars Outlaws to Far Cry. Why is that? Probably because I'm super unique and you should subscribe. No, but seriously, let's throw out some other games here. Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077, The Witcher 3 specifically, Goat Simulator, Ghost of Tsushima. Big emphasis on this one here. If you were to run through that checklist on these games, you'd find some major crossover with that list and all of those. A lot of the Far Cry 3 elements are present for them, but that comparison isn't as readily thrown out. Why? Implementation and presentation. In Star Wars Outlaws, the Far Cry 3 clone elements are the core of the game. It's what the game is, much like these games. Outlaws is just a reskin of concepts other games did better with a coat of Star Wars paint. If we're really digging at it, this game is Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain with Star Wars paint, and Metal Gear Solid 5 was Stealth Far Cry 3. But Metal Gear Solid 5, good lord, I'm saying that a lot, did the elements that made it unique from Far Cry so much better that it still has more of its own identity than this game. It was still like a 7 out of 10, let's be honest. My favorite comparison here is Ghost of Tsushima, because quite honestly, it rips so much from the Far Cry Ubisoft formula to the point that I actually thought it was a Ubisoft game when I was first playing it. But because the combat is so satisfying and it has literally the best hard difficulty of any game I've played, I rarely felt that comparison while playing, even though, everything is there. One thing I will give Outlaws credit regarding is that it actually put some effort into side missions that, while being mostly fan service, were still pretty fun. But even with that small effort in one regard, it still has that vibe. The Ubisoft vibe, the clear the bases and choose your faction vibe. Now, is Squirrel with a Gun some revolution in gaming that masterfully takes what works from this formula to create a completely new experience? Absolutely not. Squirrel with a Gun is another 6 or 7 out of 10 that owes most of its sales and fame to the fact that it's a meme. Very much in the same vein as Goat Simulator. It's fun, but not revolutionary. It's really more of a ideas concept come to life. There's 3 very important things that this game did, though. 1, it only lasts about as long as it is fun. 2, it costs $20. 3, it leans into the goofiness that sold it. And these things make this decent-ish game a 9 out of 10 experience. The idea of a game costing $70 isn't that insane when the game is worth $70. Like, for instance, if it costs $70 for Cyberpunk. Now, not launch Cyberpunk, but current functional Cyberpunk. I'd say that that's a worthwhile price for that game, even without the DLC. But to be honest, I don't see that level of effort in Outlaws outside of the open world, which is very pretty and very Star Wars. Beyond the IP, it's just kind of a mediocre spy game that checks boxes for stuff that looks like it should be in a game according to IGN. It felt long, and that's not a positive thing. Cyberpunk has like 70 to 100 hours of content with all the side missions and DLC. I was sad and kind of surprised when I realized that I'd finished it. I was invested in V's life. Kay Vess is... well, she's there. The idea here is not to just shit on Outlaws. It's not a bad game, but it does represent a lot of what's wrong with the gaming industry right now, in my opinion. An over-reliance on IPs to sell a tired and overdone and dry formula that a lot of gamers who've been around the block a few times immediately disengage with upon encountering. Shit, I could have made essentially the same video about Starfield, or Hogwarts Legacy, or Avatar, or Dead Island 2, or you get it. Stop making the crap. Although, if it's literal crabs, maybe you should, because apparently we lost like 18 billion of them. Anyway, if you're gonna use pieces of this formula, at least put enough of other influences in it to where it doesn't feel like that's all we're doing. Give us a laugh, or a scare, or an experience, or something to make that the forefront of the memories formed when playing your game. Because that's really what it's about. It's about what comes to mind when you think of that game. And if I think about your game and immediately think about clearing out some boring ass base with dumb fuck enemy AI, I'm gonna fucking cut off my quantity is not better. Look at all the stuff you can do isn't cutting it anymore. Squirrel with a Gun uses the idea of less is more very well. That's honestly one of the key differences. It didn't overstay its welcome to where I started dissecting it. I think about that game and I think about some goofs and gaffs with D's nuts jokes and funny ragdolls. Now I know it's a stretch to say that this game is influenced by Far Cry 3, even though a lot of the open world standards of play that we recognize were all set by Far Cry 3. But the point I'm trying to make is that a game can share a lot of those elements without just being Far Cry 3, and that entirely hinges on what's the main thing you think about in reference to a game. Ghost of Tsushima, awesome combat. Cyberpunk, incredible story and immersion. Elden Ring, crazy lore and environmental storytelling with a fun power climb. Underwhelm is like the primary memory with Outlaws, with like 2 seconds of, wow, this looks nice, and hours of, oh my god, I'm doing bad stealth again, and oh my god, I'm clearing a base again, and oh my god, I don't want to do stuff, I want to feel something! Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is very different from my typical stuff, but I just had this idea and had to run with it after playing Squirrel with a Gun and Outlaws in quick succession. If you liked it, like and subscribe. That's the best way to help out this channel on the way to 1,000 subs and monetization. Links for Ko-Fi, business email, and anything else are in the description and pinned comment. And don't you dare go hollow.